All right, what's going on, boss? We just keep it Mike. You listen to 102.9 Tape Deck in collaboration with the Ruckus. And tonight I got family in the building. Last time I had this young lady on the show, she was at a funky and they were promoting the joint Un Dia. And if you know, I had that joint on heavy rotation. And let me tell you about this young lady, man. Anytime when it comes to a cause with Cuba, we are always in the trenches, whether it's DC, whether it's New York, whether it's Florida. I'm trying to see if I can get up to here to Boston real soon. But anytime you catch like that flag light back signal out there, we out there in the trenches. And she's just I saw you the first time when she's up at this place, she's a complete 100% badass traveler. Oh, I mean, every time I say bring a person on the show and they say they're a person with many hats, this young lady is a woman with many, many hats. Means singing, acting, activist, mini little author thing. We won't get into that in a second. I mean, she does it all, man. She's fight for the cause the way I fight for the cause, man. And I'm glad to have her, coming through with her busy schedule because she's constantly on the move. So I thank you for coming through, ladies and gentlemen. I got Kiele in the building. What's going on, sis?
Hello, hello, hello. Thank you so much for having me. I know that we've been planning this for a long time coming, so I'm just really happy to finally be here with you guys and we could talk about all of the crazy and entertaining and real educational things that is happening in our community.
Yeah, so sit down and get comfortable because about a lot of talking, a lot of talking. First and foremost, before I get into, your life story and all your accomplishment, I spoke to you on the phone last week, but I saw you at the All Show. What was that experience like?
It was honestly really, really chill. It like the time passed by a lot faster than I thought it was. It was very conversational. It was very relaxed. He is definitely a very visible personality in what is the Cuban resistance movement. Some people could say, that people tend to have strong opinions about him, but it definitely felt very, very comfortable that you could speak openly, and we had a good conversation, and we were able to promote the cause of the political prisoners inside of Cuba, like Luis Manuel Ortega Alcántara and the other members of El Movimiento San Isidro. Funky was there. He was giving voice to Michael Osorbo as well. So I appreciate the fact that the man is giving a platform to the people and the movements that I think count and matter, in my opinion. And so I'm really appreciative of that.
One thing, I mean, I got a chance to meet him briefly when I was in DC, but the one thing I get from him, from the people that have met him, is like what you see is what you get out of him. Ain't no sugarcoating, ain't no filter, and ain't like no hiding behind the bush. It's just straight like Henny with no chaser. What you see is what you get, and he ain't holding nothing back.
Yeah, and honestly, I think coming from a culture where people are used to so much auto censorship and so much kind of double speak, hiding how you feel, or expressing how you feel for one thing, but definitely not being so direct when it comes to the topic of politics. He's really transcended that narrative, and he's broken those barriers. He says how he feels politically, he says how he feels socioculturally, and he does it again with no hair on his tongue. And I think that's really necessary when it comes to inspiring people to take advantage of their freedom of speech and their freedom of expression, for better or worse. You're
Yeah.
going to offend people when you're saying something that doesn't go along with the collectivist narrative. That's the reality of living in a communist society, right? So he is in that position and he's owning it. So, kudos to him, I feel.
Yeah, one thing about him, and I could say that about us as a community, there's like no we don't follow the status quo. And I could see that just by the way the election came out and the whole Latin community looked at us, the way we voted or whatever. But our whole attitude with that is we don't give a fuck. We voting how we voting. And if you don't want to be my friend, fuck it. We don't have to be friends. We rocking with this because we went through a whole different animal. And we have a system that our family left where the government tells you how to vote. Now we out here and now because we're friends, we have to think the way you think, vote the way we vote, act the way we act. Fuck off. We ain't having it. So I think that's just a us thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely the Cuban diaspora and that minority group spearheads individual, thought and expression and going against maybe, I guess, at least for the past, several decades, what is the normative ideal of how a Hispanic should politically think, right? But I think that stereotype is not indicative of the majority of the Hispanic community as a whole. I think it is, in fact, a stereotype that we are realizing more and more that we're breaking from, you
Yeah.
know? And we have diversity in political thought within the Hispanic Party. And people have to accept that, acknowledge that, and be open to those conversations, right? And I think that if we continue to do that, in spite of these polarizing times and people wanting to be ever more to one extreme or the other extreme, that it'll be more difficult for us to come to these conclusions. But we need to do it. It needs to happen. We need to understand that there's diversity of thought.
100%. Now, I mentioned earlier on that you're an activist, but I forgot to mention you've been an activist before you was born. You've been an activist since you were like in your mama's belly. So I want to get into that. Like, who is Kiele and how all this started for you?
Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate that. I think it's important to mention because I know that at the end of the day, everybody has a story, especially every Cuban has a story. But what I see lacking, unfortunately, is the acknowledgement and upholding of that story in times where our truth is being muddled, right? Some people just choose, right, to move on and go forward with their lives when they're second and third generation, and I completely understand that and I respect that. And I don't think that you have to live, breathe, political advocacy. That's not everyone's passion, and that's
Right.
totally okay,
Yeah.
you know. But I feel that there is a certain ideological crisis in our democratic country and within democratic countries as a whole around the globe, where there is more and more of an openness to these collectivist, extremist, left wing countries and ideologies. Romanticization. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but romanticization of el régimen castrista, the Cuban regime, and Maduro, and Pol Pot, and Ortega, Nicaragua,
I mean, the
and
list goes on. The list goes on.
the list goes on. Definitions are getting completely misconstrued and muddled. People are not connecting what they think something is in their mind versus the actual practice and result of imposing these kinds of systems on different countries and what that is.
Yeah.
So I felt that it's important to talk about my family history, to honor that and learn from it and study it, and continue that legacy of activism as my family, which I'll get into,
Yeah.
um, because not enough people I really see are doing it, and are it's necessary because every day I see more and more of my friends and just people more and more of my friends and people in my immediate space that are fully openly Marxist now and want to completely, you know, change the infrastructure of this country. You know, when my father came on a raft in 94 because of the structure that they're now trying to impose here.
Yeah.
So I'm not repeating history. It's already too many years of repeating history, right? So let's talk about the history. And I know we're gonna just segue right into that, right?
Oh yeah, baby, don't worry, sis. We here. We here. Take your time. We
Yeah,
here.
we're just gonna to wrap up the question, right?
Right.
What's the history that we're talking about? Well, let's talk about the false narrative that the revolution freed, blacks, and that everyone in the exile community is a slave owner. Makes zero sense. I'm only mentioning that because you're in Boston, and I know for whatever reason, so many people in Boston believe that that is
Oh,
truth,
I am in socialist heaven. You already know what it is. I'm in socialist heaven out here.
which is like mind-boggling to me because it is just so far from the truth.
Yeah.
But yeah, so my grandmother was a democratically elected labor leader, right? That unions oftentimes tend to side with the radical left now more than ever, as we see union leaders from the United States going to visit Cuba and parade themselves with the regime. So my grandmother was a democratically elected labor leader in Cuba, and would not because she would not follow suit with the Communist Party, she was removed from her position, and three of her colleagues were forcibly executed by firing squad. She protested against Batista the same way she protested against Fidel. She thought that the revolution, like most of the Cubans at that time, was going to bring about democratic elections, and it didn't. So
Yeah.
she had to fight. She had to escape to Venezuela. They tried assassinating her in Venezuela, agents of state security of the Castro regime. And so then she was subsequently given political asylum in 62 in the United States. Uh, my family in Cuba went through the entire spectrum of, I would say, socioeconomic growth. My great grandmother was born in a rural part of Cuba called Aguacate. And by the time that my grandmother was born, she was able to get a good, uh, education in the University of Havana, and she was able to go to private schools. And my great grandmother married a lawyer. So in Cuba, there was economic growth, right? And the movement between different classes and the ability for prosperity, which doesn't exist now in Cuba. So after exiling, my grandmother continued to, advocate for labor rights in different intergovernmental forums, like in the UN at the time when independent nonprofits could go and speak and give their testimony, which they no longer are able to in the same fashion, and the OAS and different conferences. And then we've also worked with political prisoners. I had an aunt of mine that was a political prisoner because of her association with Batista. She served 15 years and died a few months after she was released at her elderly age in Cuba. So this has affected every side of my family, my mom's side, my dad's side, multiple family members. And I find that this is a common story between so many people that they don't even openly talk about it. And so that's why I think it's so important for me to continue the work that I've seen my grandmother and my mother, and their example over the years. And it's really inspired me. And I think that we have to continue the voice of the Cuban movement in democratic countries and know that Cuban people still want freedom, as we saw on July 11th in the social uprising in Cuba. People are tired of this repression. This repression still continues all the way up until today, and Cuba wants change.
Very, very well said. Um, I got a two-part question. Um, I would assume you as a kid. Well, no, it's a two-part. Now I'll have to break this down in three parts now. What was, I mean, you being a kid, what was the things that your parents was teaching you about the cars in regards to you getting involved? Because you show me pictures, and even you as an early age, I'm talking about 4 or 5 years old, like you're actually taking pictures with prominent Cubans during that time. You know, they're pretty much shaking your hand and kissing your forehead. So what I'm trying to say is, like, what were the things that you were seeing within your eyes in Florida, and what were you able to, like, take within the stuff that you were seeing in Florida, outside of the
I
store,
think,
outside of the things that your mom was telling you in Cuba?
I think that what I saw was a lot of sacrifice and dedication on behalf of the exile community to do things honestly with very earnest work and limited resources, because I know that people want to have the conversation a lot, especially now in our community, about receiving, quote unquote government funds. But a lot of the early movements of the Cuban exile community were self-funded. For instance, like Mar por Cuba and El Presidio Político Histórico en el Exilio. They started off with, just getting donations from their fellow members. And moreover, getting grants from the United States government in no way compares to the financial resources and funding that a mafia state like the Castro regime has to impose their repression. So you're literally like comparing an NGO to a government that's not even a legitimate government, that just steals from everybody all the time and has the riches of an entire country and slave labor. So they're never going to even out. So all these nonprofits and independent movements that are self-funded still nonetheless go through a lot of effort to be able to do their work here, whether it's having grassroots movements, creating, spaces where people can have these reunions and have these community spaces, right? Being able to organize and continue to give a voice to the people inside of Cuba and help the people inside of Cuba. It all costs resources. So I saw my family, my single mother and my grandmother that worked extensive hours, go to these luncheons where even though, we might not have been the most well off, we knew that what we were doing, and I at least knew as a kid, that what we were doing was a lot more serious. It was a lot more stoic, and it was for something very important, and that example, especially of Mujeres de Mar por Cuba, has always really inspired me on how you should take the Cuba cause, right? Like Cari Roque, excuse me, like Cari Roque, right? Es un, es un, es un carácter, es una forma de ser, right? El exilio. Es una conducta. And you have to compose yourself and take the idea of political prisoners and martyrs and lack of human rights seriously, and what your family and what your parents went through seriously, and analyze it and learn it, and you can't forget it, because it is very, very serious. So I think that's the memories that I have is, seeing the political prisoners. I have like that image of Coco Fariñas in a wheelchair, emaciated on his most notorious hunger strike where it was more than 40 days.
Yeah.
And I have that memory from a very early age in my head. And I have memories of certain images of political prisoners in my mind from a very early age. So, and going to Casa del Preso at a very early age and seeing all the walls of the martyrs and everything, and hearing the roll call of the political prisoners and presente, certain things that I was so little and exposed to so early on, that when I became older and I saw everything happening in Cuba again, it just became kind of like second nature on like how to act and how to organize myself. That I realized was something that I should tap into.
Yeah.
That a lot of people around me didn't necessarily have those same references, and they were important because it was really impactful work that the Cuban community was doing in the 80s and in the 90s. And even my great grandmother's generation and my grandmother, when they first came, those 70s, 60s, those first exile leaders were so inspirational, so hardcore, honestly, very
And they were on
clear.
it too. And they were on it too because it was the same thing up in Jersey. They were on it. The first generation, they were so on it. And
They
one thing,
knew, you know, they knew
and,
the truth. And
yes,
they knew la traición, and the idea of they were really hoping for a change with Fidel. And they really gave Fidel the benefit of the doubt. And he completely came in with a communism that nobody wanted communism. Nobody. The revolution of El 26 de Julio and communism were not the same thing. They were not the same thing. We have an American Revolution. We have the French Revolution. We have the original, revolution of La Guerra de Independencia against the
yeah,
Spanish. So the word revolution doesn't mean communists.
yeah,
That was what Fidel did, and he lied about it, and he tricked everybody, and everybody was upset with him as a result and revolted against him as a result because of everything that he stole and the lie that he perpetuated and all the people that he killed mercilessly
And
with
no one saw it
no
coming.
proper trial.
And no one saw it coming. No one saw it
And
coming.
nobody saw it coming. Nobody saw it coming and nobody signed up for that. And that's not what anybody wanted. There was no democracy in that, you know? So yeah, that's why I think our work is so important and our legacy is so important. And we have to continue to, do all the work that we've been doing, yourself included up there in Boston. It's very important.
Yeah, and again, I'll say it over and over again. I commend you. I give you much props and salute to all the work and all the awareness you're bringing out to this cause because it's very important. Um, question, I never asked, you never been to Cuba before, right? You never got a chance to.
No, I
Okay,
never,
okay,
I never had the chance. And I
okay,
know that that can also maybe be, controversial, especially for the Americans in Boston, the non-Cubans that, go to their own accord, or even the new Cubans that are coming now that are appeasers with the regime. And
yeah,
so they go and they provide financing to the regime so they don't have a problem going inside.
yeah,
But unfortunately, with my family history, I wouldn't even be able to get on the plane, so that wouldn't even be an option, you
yeah.
know?
So I shared the same sentiment because I never been there neither. And I got into it with somebody out there because they claimed to be an. It was funny because I had to chew him up. He claimed to be an expert because he'd been there like a total of 14 times. So he came at my neck talking about how can you talk about something you invented before. I'm like, look, let me talk. And he was a black dude too. So I'm like, let me ask you something. And I killed it with his whole thing. If you let somebody that's white, that's married to a black person, or lived in the hood, or listen to rap music, or do quote unquote hood stuff, do you think they have the luxury to talk about black struggle or black experience or whatever the case may be? And like, well, it's different. It's different. It's different. Yeah, of course you'll say it's fucking different because you have no fucking rebuttal to that. So shut the whole fuck up with that department. But it's just a sense of arrogance and ignorance that people have where they don't understand the trials and tribulations that we go to. And a lot of us, just like my parents, they can't go back. Your parents can't go back. A lot of people that got, into it because they didn't believe in the revolution can't go back. And if they do come back, it's like but a big, asterisk around it. You might not come back if you end up going back over there. So
Yeah, especially if you're yourself, I just can't even imagine. My mom's side of my family, because of everything and obviously the human rights work that we've done, my mom's almost been kidnapped in Europe, they've been, stopped and harassed at different points in traveling. And like I told you, they tried to assassinate my grandmother in Venezuela. So it was just never an option. And then when I was like in the high school, early college years, my grandmother on my dad's side was very sickly, and I considered it for a moment. But then she as well, passed before I could even really think about it. And
yeah,
then they also didn't take care of her um, in the burial process. And that's a whole other really traumatic reality about Cuba, is that you really don't have control over any aspect of your life. So my grandmother, after she was buried, was exhumed forcibly by the regime because they were trying to make mass graves for the COVID. So my grandmother was like, scattered everywhere, and that was a really horrible experience. So after that, and my involvement again in human rights work after July 11th, I never would ever consider it an option for me to travel to Cuba and be safe. And if I can't talk about what I think or, say how I feel, why would I want to go somewhere anyways? I would have to completely like auto censor myself in Cuba. And that
yeah,
would be something really traumatic to have to do, you know?
yeah, yeah. And we don't need that. We definitely don't need that. And
No.
I mean, we all go through that. I mean, my grandmother passed away. We couldn't go see her. So before, I think a year before COVID, she passed away. We couldn't see her. So that's another life experience, another traumatic life experience we have to go through during this cost and this struggle and this trauma that we all go through. It is not just like our parents go through it because they lived through it. It gets handed out to us. We have to see our parents go through that traumatic experience. So
Yeah.
it's straight hell. It's complete straight hell. Um
Yeah. Yeah.
um one of the things I want to touch upon, and I always ask every Cuban when it comes to my show, um, when this event happened, where were you when 9/11 when July 11th hit? Where were you when 7/11 hit?
On 10
And your
11 hit.
and your reaction towards that?
Yeah, I was in Miami at the time, and that was like exactly a month, uh, a month and like 8 days to when I jumped in the stadium. And so I just had been obviously feeling a momentum prior to July 11th that I feel really culminated on that date.
Yeah,
And it was definitely like a surreal experience. It felt very dreamlike. It felt like very heavy adrenaline for several days. It was very difficult to sleep because it just felt like the city was completely revuelto, and not even like the city, but like it just felt like everything, you know. I feel honestly that the Cuban nation, because of our our just our we are an ethnic race, believe it or not. Like we look diverse, but a lot of us come from the same trade routes and same kind of like historical and genetic lineage. So I really feel like we all kind of energetically and spiritually were connected at that time. And that's why everybody from New York to Washington, D.C., to Milan, to Uruguay, to every place where the diaspora is, like exploded, you know? It felt very similar to like when Fidel died, but even more, a little more intense, obviously like more desperate, because there was a lot of death and a lot of violence and repression coming from the hands of the regime. So yeah, but I was in Miami. I went to Versailles. I was, you know, in that iconic picture on top of the car with La Virgen de la Caridad y Cachita, and when the different people would get up on the car, and you know, the free Cuba flag from jumping in the baseball stadium. It's very surreal. It's very surreal. And you know, I don't know how many years have passed now at this point. 4 years have
yeah,
passed, but it still feels like we're, you know, just in the thick of things, and that, you know, it's all very real and still happening. So we take it a day at a time, you know. And I wanted to mention a story because it really like impacted me about just like the trauma of these things, that we kind of normalize it as a community over time, but there are things that are just like really jarring, like you said, that it's just like a recurring thing that we all kind of have. Like, you know, with my new business partner, that he's always like, he's Cuban as well, but I didn't really, he's not like involved in the Cuban movement, but he's always supported what I do or whatever. You know, after working with him for months and knowing him for years and everything, his family mentions to me, you know, at a family party for the first time, that, you know, four of his uncles were killed by firing squad at the same time, you know, at the beginning of the revolution, and that his grandmother's sister was, you know, a political prisoner who served 15 years and was given 30 years just for being associated with Batista. And guess what? They were Black Cubans. Oh my gosh, you know, because everybody wants to talk about race. I really wish we didn't have to, but you know, the socialists love to, because that's their whole little trope. So
yeah,
we're going to talk about how that's a fallacy, you know, that it's not about race, it's about ideology and culture. And if you don't ideologically align with them, they're going to kill four of your family members in one swoop,
yeah.
you know. So I was shocked. He had never mentioned that to me. He didn't even mention it. His abuela and his family there mentioned it in the moment, and his abuela started crying, and I was like super taken back,
Yeah.
because you know, a lot of times I meet people and they just feel comfortable to start talking about their experiences, and they just get very emotional because they realize that they haven't spoken openly about it in a while, and it's just like we have so much bottled up trauma that we don't even talk about, you know? And I think that liberals, in the American sense, of course, right? Or I would say progressives, I'm not going to use the word liberal, progressive socialists
All right.
really like to, you know, safe space and, you know, my emotional stability and trauma.
We
But then
listen
when
to
we talk
anybody's
about
story.
yeah, but then when we talk about, oh, communism's killed over 100 million people and communism's traumatic, oh my God, no, what are you talking about? So I really want to continue to talk about the truth and not let this false romanticism of this ideology take over, another country, especially not my home. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's an uphill battle, and I'll speak that coming from mass, because a lot of these marketing socialists. Just 2 days ago, like I saw a sticker at a gas station, and they were actually having like Marxist classes for kids that are like in fourth and fifth grade out here. And here's the funny thing about it: I was around my job, and I was seeing like these college kids, and they were from Harvard. And I left the gas. We were like at the gas station for whatever reason. We were just talking about nothing. I just randomly met him there, and the kid was the one that pointed out. And it was like, yo, they teaching these kids like young kids about Marxism and communism. And one of the other kids had a joke here, like, yeah, is Cambridge. Cambridge is being Cambridge right now. Like these kids don't learn. They're freaking idiots. But like a little smirk came out of my face because that was like young kids, like 17, 18. And it's like it's crazy because I know a lot of these Marxist socialist people, they try to get the youth first. So the fact that these kids are like talking like that, it kind of had like a little smirk on my face. Like, okay, these kids got it. And I think also I don't know if you've been keeping up, but even with the voting percent election, the results came out to it. They found out that a lot of young kids are leaning more towards the right, and it's not because I mean, it's because they feel like these guys are just being completely weird, and they don't even know how to talk to us. They try to talk like they edgy, and they sound real cringy when they try to sound like they're like the best example is like I'll use my mother. It's like my mom speaking slang to me, knowing I know she knows nothing about hip hop slang to me. Like stick to your own Cuban. Don't yo what's up me. Well, that's
Yeah,
not
no, I
hey.
get you. No, I get you. I think that it's just honestly it's too extreme, it's too jarring too soon. And I thank God for that,
Yeah,
And I think that kids want still, at least in the United States, that American spirit makes kids kind of rebellious to things that they feel are being socially pushed on them. I feel like that's a very American trait,
yeah,
which I love about being American, honestly, is that we definitely have that rebellious spirit in and of ourselves,
yeah,
for better, for worse. And so I hope that we continue to just stay conscious and stay aware of the implications of what it's going to be for our kids and our families and things like that, because like, yeah, we're young, but I think the young people are realizing like, yo, I don't want my kids to be zimzers or
yeah.
whatever,
The
a
39 pronouns or
Marxist
whatever.
zimzer blob, and it's like, again, no heat to people's self-expression in their own ways, but the the human population and a healthy society cannot be built off of people who don't understand that having a family and having certain levels of boundaries and respect with certain things are what's going to keep that healthy society. That not everybody, if you want to stay as a unique minority, stay as a unique minority, because that's really what you are. You are not the majority. If you were the majority, society would literally collapse.
Yeah.
And we can't do that. We can't do that.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy you mentioned the whole pronoun thing because a couple of years ago I had a gig out in Boston. It was supposed to be aired on TV, and I had a show out there, and my whole thing was a piece about Cuba, and I got into it because I sent my piece out, but I guess they didn't get to mine until the day of the show, so I get to the show. I had to do like complete edit. So like I got the poem out, but I couldn't perform the way I wanted to perform. And then to top it off, they forced me to do the pronoun game. And I'm like, I don't want to do the pronouns. Like, you're gonna have to do the pronoun. And it went like a tug of war for a good 15 minutes. And like, well, if you want to be on the show, you gotta add the pronoun thing. And I was so pissed because I caved into it. But then even after all that, I did my performance and I got a call saying that they weren't even gonna air my piece.
They said they wouldn't even air it.
No, they didn't even hear it after all that. And my performance got like a standing ovation. Like the audience there loved it. And then after all that was done, I didn't get a chance to perform it. And like my friend that organized it, like part of the committee, but that was not her call. To her defense, she fought for me. Like she fought to like get this thing out. But I guess the people that were above her, I don't know, it was like too much, or it was too political, or because, maybe they had some kind of socialist ideology and they thought,
Clearly.
look, it was a lot going on. But it was just very upsetting that I had to go through that. Not even the fact I was more pissed off about the whole pronoun thing than the fact that it didn't air, because I do media on the show. So certain, like, I have a lot of episodes that I didn't get a chance to air because, people on top of me was like, it's too much. We might get a problem with the FCC. It was too controversial, blah, 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 which I get because, I, I know sometimes I tend to like push a certain button that it'll be a bit too much. So I get it. So if I wasn't going to air it, fine. Maybe somewhere in the future they had like a bonus clip or whatever. But the fact that made me go to war with the whole pronoun thing, I was so freaking annoyed. So annoyed.
And that's why I can't even imagine living in those states. I've never had those experiences, and I really like thank God that I've never had to go through those experiences. I
Yeah.
find it very shocking that again that they're trying to make this like a social norm, and it's just not. It's not natural. It's not normal. I'm not going to start asking people for, all this information before I can like humanly interact with them. That's not how real human interactions go. Um, and then just the pure censorship, right? And
Yeah.
like the normalization of censorship, which is something that they've been wanting to try to do, having, like mainstream media reporters talking about how the threat to democracy is freedom of speech. Wait, how did we get to one of the amendments in, our Constitution being an amendment to being a threat to democracy when it's literally the pillar of our democracy is freedom
Yeah.
of speech.
100%.
So it's very frightening, but that's why the work that you're doing is even more important. And I support you 100%. And I'm so happy to be on this, program because of that, because we need to continue to speak out, and spread the consciousness.
Yeah. Another quick story I like to tell too. Because I do a lot of gigs out here. I auditioned for a commercial here, and they referred to me as a Latin X, and I think I was like, I think I blew my chances there too, because I was the first time I'm telling yo, don't Latin X me.
You said that?
I said don't Latin X me.
Don't not next me, bro.
Yeah. I'm
But
like,
you
oh,
know what? That's the trend now, is to
but
just
I
call
got
it out.
But I got triggers effect. But that was like the beginning of the beginning stages when Latinx became a thing, and they're trying to shove it down like mainstream's throat. And I don't know
Hmm.
what it was. Like we had a professional conversation with the lady. Wait, it was a white lady, sweetheart, great girl, and we was talking or whatever. So she like, how do you feel, as a Latinx or whatever? And I'm like, yo, sis, don't Latinx me. It's like the hood of me came in, and I went from being extra upwardly mobile, then something to hook him. Like, yo, sit, don't not next me.
Don't do that.
I didn't get a call back, but
You
it
know
is what it
what?
is.
It doesn't matter because honestly, that leaves an impression. You
Yeah,
know, maybe you feel like, oh, wow, I had to forfeit something in the meantime. I had to forfeit something in the meantime and whatnot. But you don't know what seed that planted in that moment
yeah,
and what impact that can have later on. There's a lot of people who, in the moment of them doing whatever act that they did that was against the status quo, they were obviously, ostracized for it. But
yeah,
then over time, they were, you know, revered and honored for doing that act that went against the grain at that time, right?
yeah,
That they knew was going to have negative consequences, but they still did it anyways,
yeah,
right? And again, I think that we should do things with proper decorum and respect, as long as we ourselves aren't being confronted. I think it's very difficult, and it's very time and place, but in no way do I think the work that we do and the approach that we do coincides with you know some of the really physically dangerous actions that happens on the other side of the aisle at random, you
yeah,
know? So it's important for us to feel like we are within our place to respectfully, speak about how we feel, even if we know that it's not always going to sit well with people.
Yeah, I mean, I could say after a while things have definitely changed from 2 or 3 years ago because I had to call my health insurance a couple of days ago because they messed up on something, and I called them. And prior 3 years ago, prior to that, they were forcing me the pronouns. They were forcing me the Latinx. A lot of things was forced, and instead of saying y'all don't want that, it was a forced thing. So I called this place, and they're like, "Do you prefer do you prefer yourself as a him, he, or whatever they did?" But I wasn't. I was okay in that department because whatever you want to your preference or whatever you want to represent yourself as, whatever. But don't force it on me. So I'm like, okay, you ask me. So if you're gonna ask me, I'll tell you, don't align me as that. I don't want no pronouns. Label me as my first, last name, and we keep it moving. And peace, we good. And I think after that, people are starting to realize, I hate saying the word woke, but if you go too woke, you're gonna go broke. So, and I
Amen.
and
Amen.
and
And
I
I
hate
thank
some.
God for that again, that we still live in a country where the consumers, right, the average American's decision has impact, and it's not that we're forced to do things, even if it's not something that we ideally, chose or prefer.
Yeah.
We're still allowed to reject things when it does not align with us. And I think that that's a blessing. I really do.
Yeah, and I'm also get annoyed too because it's like things that I used to say back in the days, like I'm cautious the way I say it. Like, when I was in college, I used to say words like progressive and revolutionary because I felt I was progressive. And back in the days, I used to bring racial awareness in college, and I thought that was somewhat revolutionary because I had a crew with me. But it's like something happens with liberals, like they'll take a word, hijack it, and turn it to something else, like woke, progressive, revolutionary. That used to be something that was meaningful, and then they take it and hijack it and steal it and turn it to something else. And it's so
Yeah.
freaking disturbing. So I feel it's at the point like I want to take those words back and own it to me to realize what the hell it is. Because I was in a panel and I was claiming myself I was progressive, and then like 6 months later, progressive became something else. And I was like, this ain't sexy. This is not cool.
Nope.
This is not the progressive part I was talking about. I'm like the original definition. Now progressive means socialist, which I hate. They
That's
hijack it and put
exactly what it
something else.
means. It
I
means
hate it.
progressing towards socialism,
I
i.e.,
hate it.
communism.
And I'm like, I realize you communists, all you have to do is steal. Y'all just do is just steal, and they put a bow into a nice little bow, and just it's ours now.
Literally.
Y'all,
That's something that's very intentional as well and
yeah,
systematic of taking terms and redefining them to fit their new, I would say marketing campaign, right? Or their new messaging campaign.
it's the
And
new.
that's another reason why there's so many things that are convoluted nowadays about what socialism really is or what communism really is. And there's a lot of confusion, which is why having these firsthand testimonies and having the experiences and the education for people who have actually lived it is the most clearest understanding of what socialism and communism truly is. Not, again, what you read in Marx or, learned about at your nonprofit revolutionary camp.
Yeah,
That's not what living under a communist system really is like. So I think it's important.
yeah, 100%. Um, okay, there's one topic that I want to touch upon because I never had this conversation with you. What the hell was on your mind during that time in the baseball game, the infamous baseball game? What the hell were you thinking?
I would say
What kind of adrenaline you had in your rush that your Cuban ancestors say you must do this?
I think my first thing was that I was really offended because I didn't even think that it was possible for two communist countries to come and make money with their communist teams, with pretty much the communist baseball players that they enslaved to play for them, that they can't leave and they can't travel freely, and that you're going to have them come and make money off of people in exile that want to go watch them. Like, I don't know. There was just so many offensive angles to that kind of business to me, on
Yeah,
top of everything that was already happening in Cuba,
yeah,
that I felt that kind of like, yeah, that kind of offense at first. And then I was just thinking about what seemed like the most surefire way that I was going to be able to have the impact and the reach that I wanted to get the message across that I wanted that this is offensive.
Yeah.
Obviously, without, again, putting anyone in physical harm or trying to be, you know, blatantly, violent in any way. It was not about being violent in any way. It was about getting clear attention where the cameras couldn't turn, and a message could be sent to the regime in Cuba, the regime in Venezuela, as well as people here in the United States that we're not okay. We're not okay with normalizing relations with communist murderous dictatorships.
Yeah.
The exile community is not. American citizens are not. And that's why we don't want communism here. Communism is the complete antithesis of the Democratic Republic and the foundations of this country, which is why when you come in to this country, you cannot be a part of a communist institution, and you will not be accepted here into this country. So that's why I just felt like there were so many hypocritical things happening and a lot of loopholes in that. And I felt a lot of conviction, especially when they made it like near impossible for people to buy a ticket, And I knew that the people inside of Cuba wouldn't have an opportunity, as well as recently arrived Cubans would be more at risk to trying to make a civilly disobedient statement. So I felt kind of like, okay, I know I'll survive this. I know that I'm going to do this appropriately. And I have faith that I can get the message across. And it just seemed like so clear in my head, like what I needed to do. Like I
Yeah.
didn't really question it. Like once I had the idea that my abuela gave me the idea, um, I was like, you know, I know that they beat up Tintolero in 1999. Like I knew that there was a possibility that the Cuban players or the coaches or the state security agents that are there to control the players and the coaches could retaliate as they have in the past,
Yeah.
notoriously. But I felt that if they did, I'm like, yo, you're going to come out looking like you beat a woman, which is
Yeah.
one of the other minorities that you guys claim to have, fought for the feminist movement or whatever, right? So I felt like, what do I really have to lose at this point? The people in Cuba are like going through so much worse. So I found my opportunity in spite of all of the obstacles, and I did it alone and completely independent, you know, and the consequences were what they were, but I don't regret it again because I had no way went in with a violent purpose. I went in to, I think, vouch for the people that really represent the Cuban nation,
Yeah.
which is not the Castro regime that was there, gaining money that day. It's the Cuban people.
Yeah. And I mean that was such a badass move. That was such a badass move. And I remember I saw that from like a distance, and like a quick glimpse. I'm like, yo, we really out here like this. We really out here and they're not giving a fuck and really going through the trenches. Um, and and I realized you were popping because I remember I sent you a text. See if I could find it. Yes, I got yourself a gift out here. You out here gifting. If I could put it right here. You right here gifted. You out
Yeah, I
here
do have a
gifted.
GIF.
You
I've
have a
been
gift
thinking about getting it and doing the AI Ghibli thing.
yeah.
I feel like people would love that.
Go
I
in.
I, I just keep forgetting to do it.
Go
But
in.
yeah, I know that it seemed because again that was before July 11th. So
Yeah.
I don't think people were expecting, that level of rebeldia, I guess, right?
Hmm.
But again, what I did is nothing compared to what people inside of Cuba, you know, continue to go through. Um, just to try to ask for democratic change inside of the island and free elections and political plurality and respect of human rights, you know. So that's why I felt like it was something worth doing. And, hopefully my little grain of sand had a positive impact, I hope, on the whole overall movement and goal.
Um, and trust me, it's getting really noticed out here. I know from the fact that you've been doing phenomenal work. in Florida is being beyond recognized, and even from the people here in Boston that have recognized you and been doing, that you've been able to network here. You've been doing phenomenal work, and again, much respect and much props and the fact that I could say you have more balls than the average doing these streets, girl. You out here putting it down without a problem. The fact that you're able to put it on the line than your average dudes out here, because I mean, I don't want to. This is not trying to come off in a sexist man, but this should be like a man's job doing this. And the fact that we have too many cowards behind the scenes not wanting to do this because they either scared or they want to go back to Cuba or because on the low they got some kind of
Yeah,
business interest. You know what I mean? There's
that
too many men
really
out here.
frustrates me.
There's too many men out here, you know what I mean? And the real ones that we have, the real OGs, unfortunately, they either dead or in jail or they're like, they already at their elder state, so they already put up a good fight. We should have more of, fuck it, I'll say there should be more of me up here in this joint, putting it down.
Thank you
And
so much, Mike. Yeah, I have a very clear memory of that day, for instance, of
yeah,
when you know, there were a lot of us that were trying to get into the stadium because, like I had told you, they had lied and said that the tickets were sold out when they weren't. So I know that, like, as soon as I got there, I hung out with the protesters outside for a little bit,
yeah.
with the other peaceful demonstrators. Pero I very quickly was trying to figure out how to get inside, you
Mm.
know. And there was just like a group of us that were all pacing the same area. I think I would say it was like 5 people in total, and I was the only girl, and there was like 4 guys
Yeah.
of different ages, different heights. I remember there was like one really tall guy, skinny guy, and then the other guys were all relatively skinny. I don't really remember their faces, but I remember we all kind of huddled at one point around this gate that seemed like the only possibly viable option,
Mhm.
but it was a very, very tall gate, and you couldn't really see what was beyond it. It wasn't super clear, but it was like the only possible route. And I just remember that we all took a pause and we all kind of like looked at each other and like felt the vibe. And I saw that the vibe, again, these types of very split moment interactions, people don't really talk. It's all kind of like body language and just like moving quickly through the moment. And so I realized looking at them that they weren't going to go and that this was like the only option. So I like told myself I'm not going to think about this too much. I'm just going to go. Like I don't know.
And you wait. And you wait.
Yeah, and none of them did. They all just watched me. I remember they were all looking at me like, "Esa the sacrificial lamb right there. Esta está fundida. Esta está
Yeah.
fundida." To say it like that. And I was just like, I didn't even look at them. I didn't even look at them anymore. I didn't even like, it was just like, okay, boom, move forward. And then I jumped the fence, and then there was another fence. And I remember in the second fence, there was a security guard, like right there, like straight up looking at me, like eye contact, looking at me. Pero I didn't allow myself to freak out and act like I was doing something wrong because then there you really lose. So I was literally just walking slowly, like if I was lost. And I just went through this. I went through the side of the second gate. I think even my like shoe kind of came off or something fell out and I had to like grab it or whatever. But I just stayed very calm.
Yeah.
And then I saw that like the guy just kept walking and I just walked in to the inside of the stadium, and then obviously I jumped over the ledge, and I was just very mission driven,
Yeah.
I didn't let myself think about anything too much because then obviously like that'll overwhelm you. And I already knew again that I didn't have bad intentions. I didn't want to hurt anybody, you know. I just wanted to make, I think, a very necessary statement for again all of the horrible atrocities that are happening inside of Cuba.
Well, I'll say this: mission accomplished. Because you brought awareness. Mission freaking accomplished.
Thanks. I appreciate it, bro. I appreciate it.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, like I said, I live in Mass, so it's a whole completely different animal. But I do remember, I'll share a quick story with you. 10 years ago, and I get it was 10 years ago, 9 years ago, whatever year Castro died. I remember he passed away, and it was like this weird thing that happened because I was stuck in my own bubble, and I thought like people understood that. Castro was just like an evil communist dictator, but I got a rude awakening because it was like this weird adoration and praising and like this love that I was not expecting, to a point that people were coming after me. And mind you, I was a Cuban guy. You got non-Cuban people coming after me thinking that I was like a Trump supporter. Mind you, I was still a Democrat dude. And they were like, the only people that complain about this are like the rich white Cubans, the Florida people, this and the third. And I'm like, yo, this is not the story. This is not the story. I'm like, I was screaming at the top of my lungs. So I was doing like baby awareness here and then, but I couldn't go in because like living in Mass, like first of all, it's liberal as hell, and there ain't too many Cubans. Fast forward 6 years later, boom, here comes July 11th. And now it's like, okay, now you see it on camera, and now you see what the hell's going on. And it went from that to like, people that were compassion because they didn't get like that romanticism side got out of the system. They didn't get it. So now they're finally me asking me questions. It's like, thanks to that, now they got it. And I was able to share awareness. Not only was I able to share awareness, this time around, I got a team behind me. So now, because of this little networking that we had, I had people from New York, Jersey, Florida, even with Cubans in Boston. Like, anytime somebody says something about me, boom, you have like 30 comments. Like, you don't know what the hell this like. Come over here. I mean, you have some people that even went to the extreme. Yo, send me your address. I'll go there and see you right now if you think we're playing out here. This ain't a game for us. Like, it got real intense like that. So now
Hmm.
I feel as though that now we have a unity, that now that anytime something happens, like I said earlier on, we could go to New York, Jersey, Washington, Florida,
Yeah,
Cali. And I think the one thing I could say that July 11th did, it brought like a unity and a ramification of what's going on.
I agree. I agree. And again, that's all natural. And think about like that unity comes from generations again of a unified experience with millions of Cubans across the country. That again, we've all had our different experiences here in this country, but we all go through this deep generational trauma.
Yeah,
Whereas, excuse me, excuse me, whereas, these socialist networks, right, and these movements are a lot of times, very manufactured. And they again have to be indoctrinating these kids from really young. Again, it's something very intentional where it's like what we go through, we didn't ask for. We didn't pay for a class to join this club. Our trauma was imposed on us.
yeah,
And we are unified in our rejection of what was imposed on us,
yeah,
which is again something very organic. Whereas all these crazy Marxist socialist protests, all of that's very manufactured,
yeah. They're getting paid.
and
They're getting paid for
privileged.
the fuckery. They're getting paid for the fuckery too. So that's what people don't even recognize. A lot of them is paid.
Mm-hmm.
It pick bums off the street, like literal bums on the street, to be like, yo, wear this shirt. Here's $20, and just like scream some kind of propaganda. Don't even know that with us, like no one
Yeah.
paid us. We actually came together, spent our own money to these hotels, spent our own money to these flights, spent our own money to these buses, rented cars, just to like support the cause. So no one paid us.
No, 100%. And again, like they're getting paid to do what? To promote a false narrative, to recruit people in order for them to have a bigger political gain, to have a bigger political gain. Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
here with my dog. She's being testy.
Right.
But again, yeah, we are doing it because of our lived experiences that have forced us to advocate for these things, that have made us feel like we have to go through these things
Yeah.
because we literally had to leave our homes behind forcibly, like meaning the military came to our house, meaning that we were being persecuted by state agents and state police, not because, oh, we didn't like, how people were talking, no, there were much more violent and direct implications as to why we were exiled and forcibly removed as a result of communism, you
Yeah.
know. But I think that unity that we've built over time is something that's very beautiful amongst our differences and shows that there is advancements in the Cuban freedom movement.
No doubt, no doubt. Uh, like living out there, I know we got our peoples out there, so I know it's much easier to bring some kind of awareness. But has things changed over the years in regards to bringing awareness? Meaning, has people gotten it? Because at least I've been lucky on my end. I'd say between my podcast and the radio station, people have actually been getting it and asking questions and being more compassionate towards the cause. So has it been the same through in your area, even when you leave Florida, bringing these kind of type of awareness? Have people to an extent are getting the message of what's going on?
Um, I think it's a give and take. I think it's a give and take because I feel that as much as we have done the work that we've been able to do, again, we are going against a much larger establishment and institution, which is, you know, the regime, the institutions of all of these regimes and these global dictatorships, and the countries that are allied with them and fund them, um, that there's still a lot of that opposing fake propaganda that comes through, and so it's a constant battle for educating and education, but I do feel, at least for instance, that there has been a sort of awakening and understanding and interest to what communism is here in the United States, and the effects of socialism and communism here in the United States. So that does give me a lot of hope, you know, but I feel that unfortunately, with the coming of this administration, I see an augmented effort of grassroots engagement on behalf of the communists to really try to rattle, the youth and a lot of more liberal demographics here in the United States. I'm the white American liberal women, right? Again, trying to find ways to incite the African American community, but more than anything now with the Palestinian protests, and using that as, I think, a front for a lot of Marxist radicalization. So they're really heightening their grassroots efforts, but at the same time, yeah, I do see a lot of people talking about communism. So our work is never done. Our work is never done.
Right. Being that we're Cuban and we vote a certain way, and a lot of people give us crap a certain way, has any of your political views like um separated yourself from friends that don't think like you? And do you really give a fuck?
That's a funny question. Yeah, give me. I'm sorry, my dog might be a little annoying right now. Can you give me 2 seconds to just
Yeah,
put my dog away?
tell you Chihuahua to hurry up to calm down for a second. What kind of dog is it?
She's like a pit mix.
All right.
Okay, yeah. So have I lost friends? Oh yeah, I've lost a lot of friends. But it's something that I am kind of used to in certain ways, in the sense of, like, I have friends, but then they want to keep me in a certain box that I tend to maybe not stay in. And so then they kind of just fall off over time. Um, but I don't take it too personally. I think that things move the way that they were always originally intended to. And I've always been somebody that have moved very somewhat independently in different spaces, so a conventional artist might not feel comfortable moving in, a political space, or in a more conservative space, or vice versa. A very conservative person might not know how to work within an artistic space. I think artistic conservative people in and of themselves are very unique. I think being a young Hispanic conservative artistic female isn't necessarily the most common thing, but it is coming out more. And I think it is becoming more popular in certain ways to embrace these characteristics. As you said, the youth are embracing some more, I would say, quote unquote, what is conservative now, but I think it's really just kind of rational, moderate, decent thinking, you know. Um, and I think people are just craving a little bit of decency
Yeah,
with how they want to carry themselves in their lifestyle. And I think humans prefer that for the most part. It's not always about being fringe and angry and feeling like a victim and being reckless and, you know, free sex, free drugs, free partying,
yeah,
el libertinaje, ¿verdad? In Spanish, there's a difference between liberty and libertinaje. And I think that it's kind of like that overly toxic openness that leaves you vulnerable to a lot of pain and a lot of, you know, if you're religious, it's sin in certain ways in the conventional sense, but also just things that aren't healthy for you in the long run that are going to negatively affect you physically and psychologically. Um, so decency's like on a comeback. And like I think that that's great. And I think that we should embrace that because it builds a healthier society again. So if I lose friends in the process, that's okay. And a lot of times those friends end up coming back later on and saying, wow, Kiel, you really inspired me in this way by just being truth, like being true to yourself. And you always being true to yourself no matter what. And I think that everyone should be that way. And even if you're going against the grain.
yeah. It's funny you mentioned that because I'm seeing like this weird like cycle, and you mentioned the whole thing that everybody wants to, have this like uh, free liberty lifestyle, like free sex, free drugs. Now, remind me, we've been through this before. This happened in the 60s. Everybody wanted free love, free sex. Then from that, it turned from having a hypersexual lifestyle, hyper, you know, lifestyle with the drug thing. Then the 80s came, and then came AIDS, and then came the overdose with heroin, and then the cocaine stuff, and then people just started deteriorating. Then, was cracking the hood. So we have, we want to have like this, fun, liberating lifestyle, but it does come with an effect. It comes
It
with
comes with
consequences.
consequences.
Consequences. It
Yeah,
comes
it
with
comes
serious
with
consequences.
consequences. And I feel that, you know, I came from a very wonderful, hardworking mom, but we didn't have all of the privileges in the world. And I see more and more that it's kids who were given a certain level of privilege that live in a bubble and do not know what it really takes to establish a healthy societal structure. And they just want to be rebellious because they're bored with themselves. So they want
Yeah,
to have a purpose. So that's why they eat up all of this propaganda without understanding the destruction of what they're doing to society. Destroying the nuclear family doesn't build a good home.
yeah,
Having a fatherless home doesn't build a good home. Having
yeah,
a home filled with drugs and, open sex where everyone's sexual all the time and sexualizing themselves is not healthy or conducive for raising a child. None of these things, sexualization, drugs, and not having good work ethic, that you're always expecting somebody to give you something, or especially that you expect the government to give you something, which is other people's money. It's
yes,
not that the government just made it up, like it's other people's money. You're stealing from other people. So if you teach your kids all of these things, you're going to break society. So
yeah,
we cannot function this way. We can't live off the government. We cannot be druggies. We cannot be bums. We cannot be, sexually all over the place. We are going to promote diseases. We can't all be having, mental illnesses and identity crises and not able to handle real life and not being able to take care of ourselves. You don't make a good people with those foundations and those principles. So
yeah.
that's why we have to come back to decency,
100%.
right?
And look, you're speaking to
Common
a degenerate.
sense.
You're speaking to a degenerate. I'm a degenerate. I love to do bullshit. Damn it. Even sometimes I gotta go to church on a Sunday and relax. Be like, I can't be drinking all the time. I can't be
Of
looking at strippers.
course.
I like doing stupid things, but you gotta keep it in moderation. That's
Yeah,
all.
we're human
Yeah.
beings.
Yeah, it's like
We're
junk food.
human
I love
beings.
junk food. I love junk food, but if I keep eating junk food, my cholesterol's gonna go to the roof and have some fucked up arteries.
I know. Lately, I've been too into the Frosties Thin Mints. I don't know if they have that up there, but that like Wendy's came out with a new Frosty Thin Mints. It's terrible. But I agree, it's a thing of I'm not judging nobody either. I'm not perfect.
Yeah,
Kiele Cabrera is not perfect. And we are all sinners. I'm a person of faith. We are all sinners. We are all fallible. We all have our flaws. We all have our weak points. But we cannot normalize doing things that we know are not healthy, are not right, and are not conducive to a healthy society.
yeah,
So those things can't be normalized. Are they there? Yeah, they're there, but they shouldn't become okay. That it's like, oh, it's like how it is in Seattle to just walk around naked in front of
yeah,
children. Like,
yeah,
oh yeah, he can have his dick out. He can have
yeah,
his dick out. It's fine. There's a 2-year-old right there, but he can have his dick out. It's not sexual. He's
yeah.
just walking around with his dick out, but it's not hard. So wait, is it hard then? Oh no, but he's not looking at the kid. He's not looking at the kid, so it's still not sexual. Are you guys? Come on. There's something sick and there's something wrong. That is not okay. You
And if you
know?
look at the dick, then you're the one with the problem because you're being degenerate because you're looking at it. You're just focused. It's your fault for looking.
No, if you're, no, that's the
Either.
other thing. If you look, then maybe you're sexually
You're the problem.
harassing them.
Yeah. Why
Because
must you
then
look?
you're the one sexualizing it because you're saying it's sexual because it's hard.
Yeah.
But if they don't say it, if they
Yeah.
don't say, "Oh yes, I feel aroused," and they'll just look at you with
Yeah.
their thing there, then they're not doing anything wrong. But if you
Yeah.
call
Yeah.
it out, then you're saying
Yeah.
it's
You're the
sexual,
problem.
so you're in the wrong.
Yeah. I
And
should
you're
mind my business.
harassing them now.
Yeah.
So you're the criminal. The victim becomes the criminal.
Yeah. I
And
can't.
and and what does that do? That makes people scared to go out. And then why do they want you scared to go out? So they can control you. This all has an intention. You break
Yeah.
down society, you boost danger, crime, rape, breaking down of the family structure. So then you are so broken that you go to the government to save you.
Yeah.
And then you have no control.
Dependency. They all want dependency.
They
Don't you
just want you broken so that you can be dependent on them. You
And
know?
here's the thing. Here's the funny thing I find it weird. These people, which I will say the socialist community comedies, they don't trust the government. Because you talk to them one on one, they don't trust the government, but at the same time, they're looking for the government to save them and cure all their problems. Don't you find that kind of ironic? They're like, fuck this system, it's trash, but I'm gonna go for the system to help me out with my problem and fix my shit that I fucked up on. That's such a it's
It is the root because you want to know what the root of communism really is? Envy and laziness. Envy, laziness, and like
depression, and a lot of
victimhood.
bad people and sad people too. Because
Victimhood, like depression, like victimhood.
yeah,
Like, yeah, like that was the other thing I was thinking. It was like victimhood, that like you really feel like, oh my God, like I'm scared, like there's something wrong, I'm depressed, like, oh, I'm a victim, I need somebody to help me and save me. So it's that mixed with the envy and the laziness. Like just pure laziness, like you don't want to do nothing. You want to blame everybody else for your problems, and you want everybody else to do the work that you don't want to do, and you prefer to work on complaining and sabotaging and hating and envying other people that have what you don't have and trying to steal it from them, because instead of you just doing things for yourself and taking care of yourself and focusing on your own problems, you know it's really sad. But though it's those raw human, again, flaws and sins that fuel the communist Marxist machine for people to turn against their own brothers and sisters and family members and friends, and do the horrible things that collectivist ideologies lead people to do.
um, another I'll one up you and say this. A lot of people, because I came across a lot of these type of individuals. Not only that, they're broken. They're broken. There's a way to get around it, because if you come across them, you have a conversation with them, something happened to them, either like uh, they something basic, like they didn't finish school, so they sucked. They were mediocre at best. Something happened like where their parents didn't treat them well. Something happened that was a failure with the marriage. Something happened like you had a business and failed. Something happened like something happened that you probably had like a family that were like overly religious, so they shoved religious down your throat, and a lot of them become atheists. If you realize, a lot of common social, they don't believe in God, so they're
No, they're
lost
all
spiritually.
mainly atheists. They're all
Yeah,
mainly atheists,
and
at least
the
at the beginning,
yeah, and the best example I could give you was Castro, because if I recollect, like he was like a son of a bastard father that didn't want him, so they kept him somewhere isolated where he couldn't be part of the family, so he was just there. So his dad didn't want him. Then it was just like he was lonely. From what I heard, he was being bullied up in school. Nobody was really messing with him like that because they were making fun that he was a bastard kid. So there was a lot of emotional pain coming to him where he would just had all that emotional shit bottled up. So he decided to take it on the country. So a lot of these people, they come
Yeah,
to with money.
exactly, exactly, absolutely that. He was resentful
Yeah,
about not being the top dog when he wanted to be the top dog and not being the coolest cat in town when he wanted to be. And so he envied the prosperity of the Cuban people. He
yeah,
envied the capacity and the high capacity of the Cuban man that he felt that he couldn't be at the top of, or he couldn't be the leader of. So he wanted to bring everybody down so that he could feel superior, and that was his overall objective. And he was just a very spiritually perturbed man as well, and he definitely broke a lot of people spiritually. For instance, what we're going to see now with the UMAP film, that they're going to show how they took religious leaders and put them in forced labor camps and
yeah,
made everyone atheists, and mixed again gays who they also highly persecuted at that time with these religious leaders and persecuted them all together. So, I think we can't forget again what the real root principles are of communism and not allow them to mask themselves as something else, you
yeah.
know?
And it's funny, like he banned religion, but then he forced everybody to have a picture in his house and praise him. So that's the funny. Like he wanted a God worship holy
He
place.
wanted to be God. In his
Yeah,
mind, he was God. This
yeah.
man was a megalomaniacal narcissist sociopath
Maniac.
that
It's a maniac.
enjoyed the power trip till the very end, which is why people literally, while we were celebrating, yeah, there were people that were like, "Ay, Papa Fidel." Like they really
Yeah,
felt like one of their family members had died because
yeah,
they're like, but not even family members, like their God, like
yeah.
like their creator,
The Messiah, the freaking Messiah. It was
their
nasty work.
Messiah. That's the
Nasty
best way to
work.
say it.
Nasty
It's
work.
true.
So,
It's true.
all right, we're about to wrap it up because I got fuck shit I got to take care of later on. So I got to do some degenerate shit.
No worries.
Yeah. All right, before I get out of here, man, I do want to talk about the event you went to, the combating socialist event. Was it?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Please talk to my people about that. What was it about, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, so I felt really blessed to have the opportunity. Sorry if you guys hear my dog or not. Um, but I felt really blessed to have the opportunity to be able to bring these student leaders from Venezuela and Nicaragua who are around my same age, literally, we're 27, 28, and in our early 20s, right? I ran in the stadium when I was 22, going on 23. And a lot of these same friends of mine that I now consider to be friends, but I met as exiled coincidental activists from their respective countries were also going through, well, not like myself, but through a real repression in their countries, just for trying to get an education that wasn't filled with indoctrination, and being able to go to school regularly, or not standing for a forced activity, propaganda activities that were being promoted by the regime that they didn't align with. So they both talked about how they were part of the different protests, both in Venezuela and Nicaragua. Nicaragua was in 2018 when they had their social uprising. And in Venezuela, I think it was starting since like 2016, honestly, on. And we've seen all the protests that have happened in these past 5 years in Venezuela. But they saw their friends, get shot in the head in front of them. They saw their friends get shot in the neck in front of them in these massive protests. I think one of them gave a testimony of how he was there. My Nicaraguan colleague, he was explaining how in one of the civil protests, I believe they fired a rubber bullet to his friend, and his friend kind of like kicked back, and there was a metal shard that was like coming out of the ground, and it's like sliced into the neck of his friend and
Yeah,
like punctured his friend's neck, and that's how his friend died. And he just saw his friend like die there in front of him. So it's like a whole other level of militarized brutality against unarmed citizens
Yeah.
that I think people need to really understand. That he said in that protest, in total 300 over 300 Nicaraguans died.
Yeah.
So at the hands of the state again, which is I think what people need to really process about how communist militarized dictatorships work, is that they're very bloodthirsty and they make it a very unfair fight, and they have no acknowledgement for life in any way, in any way. They actually go out of their way to torture you physically, psychologically, follow you for days. Once they see that you're a leader in these protests, beat you, arrest you, and eventually execute you, you know? I've never seen that here in this country. And I see people protesting in the United States all the time, whether it's Republican or Democrat. You might get in a fight, you'll get arrested. You might have a hands-on altercation with a cop because you a lot of times were looking for it, not because the cop went out of their way to shoot you in the face, with a rubber bullet.
Yeah.
And I think people need to really understand the differences of when you have a violent, totalitarian, bloodthirsty state, and when you have a democratic state that just has certain laws that it has to impose, because there's a certain rule of law in every country that's necessary for a civil society. But it doesn't mean that every country is authoritarian because they have laws that they have to impose.
Yeah.
It depends how those laws are structured and who's imposing those laws. So yeah, we take it a day at a time, but I think that event was to show that differentiation to American students, to look at students their same age from these countries and understand that difference,
Yeah.
right? Because you're having them tell you to your face what they went through, and they have the pictures and the videos, and they're giving you the whole story. So you
And
can't
people's
say that
testimony.
you didn't know about it,
Yeah, you got people's testimony. So
Yeah, you can't say that
yeah.
you don't know what's going on, or that that's not true when the person's literally in front of you showing you what happened to them, you know?
Yeah, 100%. So cool, cool. All right. So before we get out of here, last time let's start with you music wise. You talked about you didn't want any morning coffee. So what's going on? We got any more singles waiting for you?
I love it. Yeah, I'm working with a new producer now called El Mola. He's really, really cool. He had his time when he was living inside of Cuba, and he's worked with a lot of really wonderful Cuban artists and American artists as well, producing and writing. So I'm excited to kind of be working on this separate project with him. I made another song called Free Range with him that will be coming out very soon, probably within the next month before the summer, before June. And I had a recent show with Danai Suarez in her space, not with her, but
Okay.
it's her new space that she
Okay.
invited me to perform in. And so that was a really great honor. And just being able to see her and share with her and share my art with her in her space was a beautiful experience. And I finished the song and the music video with Funky and Acevedo and Doble Nueve, Tic Tac, which was the song that you were in, right? The music video
Yes.
that I invited you to be a part of.
Yeah, go look
So
it out.
that song got a lot of attention. It was promoted on Otaola. We performed it at Danai Space, Arc for Art. And a lot of exciting things have been happening. So I think, with the creative and the advocacy, right, that a lot of beautiful things and a lot of work is still to come. And my political engagement continues to evolve. And I think that it's important, to be involved in civic engagement within your community. And so I will continue to do that. And it's what I'm passionate about and what brings me joy. So again, what you're doing right now with this radio show is that, providing a platform to talk about these topics and be civically engaged and culturally engaged. So I really appreciate it, and I hope we can continue to do things more like this in the future.
No doubt, no doubt, no doubt. Any future film projects we should look out for? Any?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. You know, I am working right now with a Cuban gentleman that his grandfather was a very notable Cuban singer in his time, that he gained notoriety in the pre-revolutionary era, and he died at the very beginning of the revolution at like 101. And so this gentleman, you know, we're going to be working on possibly bringing the script of this gentleman's life to life, right? And developing this episodic series over time to really show people what Cuba, pre-revolutionary Cuba was like, the talent of pre-revolutionary Cuba, something kind of boardwalk empire-esque. Um, and it's something that is definitely going to take a little bit, I think, we're still in the early developmental stages, but I know that the resources are there. I know that the passion is there. And I think it's definitely a story worth telling. So that's been in the works. And then there's a TV show pilot that I finished filming last year, with also some very notable Cuban American leaders that I'm excited that we're in the final stages of editing now. And again, backed by some really, you know, notable people in our community that I think want and have influences of their own Cuban story and truth in this scripted episodic narrative. And that's gonna, it's like more kind of Stranger Things. It's more modern, but again, a Miami story and a very Cuban American influenced script. So I'm really excited about that. But you know, film takes time. So that's why it's not something, and even like TV shows, but these bigger budgeted projects take time. But once they're out, they're so worth it. So I'm really, really also happy to be involved in these projects as well.
That is so awesome. Keep me posted in the next single. So
Of
post.
course,
Keep me
I
posted.
got you.
All
Free
right.
Range is coming out soon. You're really gonna like it. It's gonna be great.
That's what's up, man. So, well, ladies and gentlemen, there we have it, man. I got the homie Kiele in the building finally, man. 100 thank you. You know what it is. I should be down around your area in a couple of months. We're gonna talk about that later on, but I got some exciting stuff coming on my end. I would love to be a part of that. I need some support from my peoples. So
Of
hopefully y'all
course.
get up. But yeah, man, it is what it is, man. This your boy Keeping Mike. You've been listening to the tape deck collaboration with the Ruckus. You can catch me here every Friday from 6 to 7. And it is what it is, man. We won't stop until we see if we go. Leave it down.
Yes, sir. Leave
See
it.
you out. You know what it is. I'll catch y'all next time. Peace.
Bye.
Thank you, darling.